All right, so today we're going to be talking more about what blueprints are. I talked about them in the first two lessons over yesterday and Tuesday, but we're going to go a little bit more into depth on what blueprints are, how they relate to Unreal Engine, and how you can use them to program and solve problems and build your own game. So programming with blueprints is really intuitive because it's a very visual system. You can actually see all of the different structures and relationships, and it's very color-coded. It's easy to pick up and understand. And there's a lot of key concepts that blueprints can help replicate, which are real programming features like loops, conditionals, and variables. If you don't know what those words mean, don't worry about it all, because we're going to go a little bit more into depth what they mean on a high level. So what do those words mean? A variable is kind of like a locker, right? You can take values in and out of it, and the program uses it to store those values and interact with other things and make decisions. You might ask, how does a program make a decision? And that's where we use a concept called conditionals. And that's basically a program's way of asking a question about the state of things. So could anybody in the chat who maybe has previous programming experience, feel free to unmute yourself. Tell me like what an example of a conditional would be.
That would be like, if you have like an if statement, the conditional would be what is inside the if statement. It basically just checks whether or not a variable is matching to a certain condition you want.
Yeah, that's exactly perfect. It's checking that thing, right? So it's a way of like asking a question, finding out. And based off of the result of that, your program can execute different code. So that's letting your program make a decision. And you're going to use that a lot in Unreal Engine and game design because there are going to be different pathways for your player. The last one is a loop, which is a concept in programming that lets you iterate through a set of items. And that might sound really weird right now, but one of the best parallels in gaming is a game loop, right? A game has a set of code that it iterates through very, very fast, and this is called the main game loop. You guys have heard of frames per second, right? You know, if you're really not laggy, but if your computer is like a potato, you're gonna get low frames per second. It's gonna be like 5, and it's gonna be.
I don't even know what frames are.
All right, well, that's great still, because frames are one execution of that loop. So it's one time that game going through all the code and going back to the top, going all through the code and back to the top. So if you have a high frames per second, that means your computer is able to handle a lot of executions of the game loop. Maybe if you're running on like a laptop or something not so powerful, not so much. It's not going to be able to run through that code as much. So you can connect.
Ponce, sorry to interrupt. Frames are also like really critical to speed runs. Like if you've ever seen like a Zelda 64 speed run, there's basically huge. So there's boxes right in every game. What some people may refer to as like a frame rate is the way that those boxes refresh over time. People find glitches by being able to kind of take those iterations and before there's refresh in the game, using that as like a glitch and kind of progressing the storyline faster and beating the game faster and stuff like that. So there are real applicable circumstances with esports as well. And if you have absolutely nothing to do with your life, there are some thrilling speed runs available on YouTube. I'm sure most of you guys have seen them. But some of the older games like Nintendo and N64 and stuff like that, basically the way they do it is just on what Ponce was talking about like refresh rates on frames and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you, Pasha. I think that's a super direct example and might help a lot of people because I know maybe not everybody's heard of what a loop is or what a frame is, but I think most people here have heard of like speed runs and stuff like that. So that's a really good example. So that might still sound pretty abstract, like a dictionary definition, but going through, you get a better understanding. So how can we use these programming terms and blueprints in Unreal Engine to solve real problems that we have during game design? So if you guys remember from the other day when I showed you my game, it was about pretty much you driving a car and bombs are falling from the sky, right? You don't want to get hit by one of the bombs and you don't want to get turned on your side or upside down. So how do I tell the game to end when that happens, right? There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, but at the time I didn't really know how to. Does anybody have any ideas, like high-level ideas, how to get the game to end when that conditional is met, that a bomb hits the ground or hits the car or it flips over?
I can do, I think I could, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was good.
Use like an if statement running inside of a, you could run an if statement running inside of a for loop for something like a health meter or something like that. And when it hits 0, it keeps checking until it hits 0. And then if that conditional is met, then the game is over.
You guys are pretty pros.
For the car flipped over, I think that you can possibly do it. I don't know if it would either be on the Y or X axis, but like I don't know how your car's flipping over, right? But it's just a guess. If like it's you can count it as if the car flips over like past like let's say 90 degrees on one direction. That's specifically when the health goes to 0 for that specific if statement of whatever variable you have to health or something, and then that's when the game would restart.
That's perfect. Those are two really good solutions to that problem. And even better, you guys used all three of those terms in those solutions: variables, loops, and conditionals. Gio, right now you were talking about like the coordinates. Could you tell me what a variable in that solution might be?
You said, tell you what?
Like a variable in that solution where you had the different coordinates and stuff. What's the variable that you might use to like track that? Like just a random one.
Oh, so you mean like the X and Y variable? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, that's perfect, right?
Oh,
You
okay,
have a variable for the coordinate.
Yeah, I was originally thinking first, like, because I know there's like X, Y, and Z usually, where Z's not, even though people expect like Z would be the Y, usually what I would think, but it's not. It's really just Z, whereas it's like the height and like the depth of a specific like entity where you can control like the entities to the Z axis, and then like the Y is coming from the left to the right, and then the X is going forward and back. But Z's from when I use Wonder, like the Z axis for some of these applications is what moves the thing up and down. But sorry, I'm just over complicating stuff. Don't listen.
No, don't worry about it. That's a great answer. And the other, I can't see on my screen who gave that answer, but that was an absolutely perfect answer too, because whoever it was said you put it within a loop and you're checking with a conditional, and health itself is a variable. So that's an amazing answer. The solution that I actually chose in the end was to create a mesh, which is just a geometric object in Unreal Engine, and I put it right over the top of my car. And if anything hit that mesh, then the game would end. So you might say that sounds like a really silly and gimmicky solution, and to an extent it is. But what that did was easily let me account for two situations. Number one, a bomb hits the roof. Number two, the car flips over, right? So we'll look at the solution in Unreal Engine right now. Let's see if I can pull it up. This is what it looks like, right? So over the top of my car, I have the plane, which is invisible. You can see right here, and it's placed directly on the top of my car. You can see me moving it right here. And that's great. I have the object that allows for it, and now I go to the logic behind it. So this little chunk of code right here made using blueprints is basically saying that I want to end the game on the component hit, when plane is hit. So when the plane is hit, don't worry about this piece right now. It sets the game over variable to true, and it destroys the car that I'm driving, right? So that looks simple enough, right? Everybody can tell me, what each of those blocks does, except for this one, right? If it gets hit, then set the game to over and destroy the car. It's simple, right? Everybody can visually see that and understand that. Well, what you actually did is a lot more complicated than what it looks like. You were able to write this block of code right here just by manipulating those blocks and being able to tell me what those things did. The person who was talking about the solution earlier was spot on. You have your variable, you have your loop that's checking. This is your game loop, right? It executes every frame. And then you have your conditional, checking if something happens. And his example of using health is actually a really common one in Unreal Engine in game design, where each item has a durability. So in future days, we're going to go over more concrete concepts, but hopefully this was a good introduction to blueprints and kind of into getting into coding, right? Because if you can understand what this means, then you can understand what this means.
Yeah, and that's I hope you guys are seeing what a powerful tool the Unreal Engine can be. You've seen, thanks to Ponce's tutorials this week, it seems impossible at first when the challenge is in front of you, but you've seen, well, I can download it. Sure. Oh, I can start with templates to make it a little easier as a starting point. Oh, I can use basic configuration mode to get some objects in there, get them set up. And what you're actually doing is coding through configuration. And if you look at what Pasha showed you earlier in an example of code, and you can go find code literally anywhere right now, to this tool is how you're going to compete against each other for money, and you can all do it. none of you is set up in a way where this is too hard for you mentally. It's just a matter of, can you get your creativity in here and your hard work from your fingers and your eyes, researching and looking things up, like Pasha showed you that roadmap, and apply it in what Ponce has showed you in the Unreal Engine to build your tool. So Ponce is going to have more takeaways now that you're kind of getting a sense of this, because he's going to go into 200 and 300 level courses in his tutorials next week. So I want everyone to really start making sure you've got everything downloaded, and you just start. And remember, it's half, remember the Steve Jobs stuff, right? That you've seen out there. It's half technical ability and it's half artwork, right? If Steve Jobs, like we talked about earlier in the week, hadn't randomly gone into that calligraphy class, all these fonts you guys love using in Discord and sending your stupid messages to each other with, right? That wouldn't be a thing that existed. So I need you guys to turn on your creativity and your kind of technical diligence work and combine those into making an amazing game.